Welcome back to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro. I'm Anne Scottlin. Did you know a compelling interview can increase your podcast listener base by up to 45%? Join me today as I show you strategies that are used by top podcasters to create unforgettable interviews. So hang tight for that. We're going to talk about the importance of mastering the art of interviewing, key techniques, and the benefits of great interviews. And lastly, you're going to want to stay tuned until the end for a special technique that top interviewers use to get their guests to open up and share their best stories. And that reminded me, I'm going to throw in an extra bonus at the end. So stay tuned for that.
Welcome to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro, your gateway to becoming a thought leader in your field. Dive into the world of elite podcasting and master the art of influence and inspiration. And now, podcast personality, award-winning author and actress, Anne Scottlin.
So yes, as always, so glad to have you here today, watching or listening to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro. Hope you've been doing great. I have been working in the yard. I have a turnaround driveway in front of my house, and it has grown a lot of weeds this spring, and it's never been formally landscaped. I think I always was hoping that just the natural growth from our area would just look pretty there, but it doesn't. It just looks like weed. So I'm on my own. The ground is hard, and you cannot believe the kind of shovel I had to buy this week. It's like very pointy and has teeth on it to dig out grass. And so I'm out there. I got up at 5 o'clock this morning to start working while it was light, because once it's 90 something degrees, you can forget it. So I have those first few hours to work. So preparing by having the right tools, having the right fertilizer, getting ready to dig out all that awful grass and thistles, preparing and having the best tools is what's going to make it. Oh, you'll find out. I'll let you know. An amazing bed garden and landscaping when I'm done. The art of interviewing is so much the same. It's just how to get the best from your guests by having the right tools, doing the right preparation of the soil. Anyway, and it makes such a big difference. Positive experiences for your guests. I'll share a couple positives first, because it's always more fun to have the negatives last. So positives. What are some really positive experiences I've had? I'm going to make this comment as when I've been a guest on other shows, on other talk shows, on other podcasts. How has my experience been, good or poor, depending on the place? One of my favorite guys in the world, Kevin McDonald, before he was even my favorite guy, the first time I was ever on his show, which is Positive Talk Radio, check it out, which doubles as a video podcast, I instantly felt comfortable. As soon as I sat down in the session, and I was trying to remember what was it that the host did to make me feel at ease. And I think that Kevin just struck up a conversation with me like we'd been old friends since all time. Not, hi, my name is Kevin. Your name is Anne. Let me have your credentials. He just started chatting in the most lovely way. He's such a gifted radio and voice and podcast video voice. So he just started comfortably. You have that energy that just makes the other person feel like you're sitting in their living room having a coffee or a drink or something, which is amazing. And those that give you a little lead time, the people who schedule me in a few minutes early so that I can make sure that all my tech is working well before they just start taping. Because sometimes we'll just go straight to taping, and I haven't had a chance to double and triple check that they are seeing what they should see. So let's get on to the more exciting negatives. Just kidding. All right, so what are one of my biggest pet peeves when I am a guest on your show or someone else's show? Canceling on me at the last minute. I hate that. Sometimes I have literally based my schedule and my airline tickets around your show so that I can be in my studio just in time to have it and then take off to the airport. I could have probably gone on this trip yesterday instead of today. And if you wake up this morning and say, oh, I'm so sorry, they've had a conflict, I am not going to be very happy. And chances are I'm not going to be your guest next time, because that is just poor taste. Now, I realize there are rare exceptions, and I say that I have had to make my rare exceptions too. but just make sure that they're rare exceptions, not just because someone offered you something fun to go do today. So all of you who are having a world-class podcast, which is what we talk about here on Launch It, you don't have to worry about that because you already are in the game big time. You know what you're doing, or you're working with me, and you have no last minute errors like that, or very rare. What's another pet peeve of mine? Oh my gosh, having to pay. Don't ever pay to be on a podcast. You are giving them your time, knowledge, and experience. This is starting to sound like an episode for guesting. Okay, I'll speed it up. I'm just telling you what guests don't like. I once was scheduled to be on a podcast. I'd already committed and it had been a referral from a friend. And so I was pretty much locked in. And then I heard from their office, from the show office, like the day before, we didn't get your payment yet. I'm like, payment? What? Oh, for all our production costs, blah, 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 blah. No, I had to do it once. Did I ever go back on that show? No. And they've invited me so many times. And no, I'm not going to pay to be there giving you my expertise. So, the end. We'll do this again as a different show. What else? Generic questioning. When a host is just using a form of questions and it just shows they couldn't be bothered to put in the time to look up questions that would be more relevant to me. They're just really generic and boring and really a waste of my time. And other worst case scenarios of when there have been technical issues, some which are avoidable and some which aren't, like on an international show. And the recording was terrible. The technical issues were on their end, but it was a live show. And I was mortified that I had agreed in advance to promote their episode on all of my platforms and channels because I committed to it. But now I was mortified to air something of such low quality. So be careful what you commit to also. All right. So we're going to move right into now that some of the things not to do. I'm going to tell you some of the things to do. And the first one is going to be prepare. Big shock. Just like my flower bed, landscaping bed. I don't even have flowers. It's just mostly going to be plants and grass and bushes and a spruce tree. So prepare, research your guests. Unlike some of those people I just mentioned, where they just gave me really generic questions, and look into your guest background, their work, their recent activities, and listen or read previous interviews they've done. That can be really priceless because if you read articles or listen to other interviews, you will discover often some touch points that either you relate to personally or that something that you might not have ever thought to ask that will be super relevant to your show and give it a real edge. So be sure to do the research. And yes, develop a question list, but not a generic list of 15 questions that you ask every single person in the same order, like some kind of AI. Shit. Actually, it does better than that now, you guys. So stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Make them customized, make them interesting, make them specific, and include questions that require more than yes, no answers, right? Questions that encourage them to give you a more in-depth response. Not, do you love your job? Yes. What is it about your job that you love so much? Find those ways. Now they have to give you the details, which makes it more interesting, makes it more story-like. And pre-interview communication, brief your guests on your format, your topic, send them an illustration, an overview or similar outline to what they can expect. Maybe send them links to some of your recent episodes. Make it easy for them and then ask them if they have any concerns or questions. A lot of people forget. I was a concierge in one of my jobs right after college. I worked for a big corporate firm on a high level floor in downtown. I felt it was like right out of college. But as a concierge, you're always one step ahead of your client's needs. So instead of waiting until your guest has an issue or concern, make sure you open the door to that. My insider secret is I have found that I have way less conflicts and way less issues and concerns from guests when I open the door in a very vulnerable way from the beginning. Let me know, is there anything you need? Is there anything you want? Do you have any questions at all? Is there any way I can make this easier for you, more convenient for you. So remember that when you give generously to them, they're more likely to give generously to you in their content. And one last thing, one best practice for preparing for your guests, especially if you do video podcasting, which of course you know is my favorite, do a tech check, not the day of, on a previous day. The day of should be 1, 2, 3 minutes of checking, triple checking, going through our, like in my studio and my producer, a production checklist to make sure all the things are on, off, set, all the things that you need from your guests to do from their end. The real tech check, which is to do sounding, sound, lighting, play with backgrounds if that's something you do, test their mics, make sure what kind of computer they're using, because a lot of times we'll get a computer that just gives them this really blue sheen when we're broadcasting or taping on something other than Zoom, when we're using one of the more sophisticated tools for production. Often it requires more sophisticated lighting. So there's lots of ways you can help them with that. Lots of things I teach in my workshops and otherwise to help you do that. But I would say that is definitely one of my best practices, to make sure that the tech, and on a day beforehand, because I may not get through this whole thing today. I'm not going to worry about it if I don't. We'll just have a part 2. On the day beforehand, or any day beforehand, you want to do that tech check, because I have been a guest and occasionally also been the host, which is even more agonizing, I think. And my producer who's watching right now will definitely relate to this, where we had someone scheduled for a time, they show up, and we spend, if we didn't have back-to-back episode to shoot, we would spend 45 minutes with them just trying to tweak their light, explaining to them how their sound is so bad, saying, can you please adjust these settings? What kind of platform do you use? What kind of laptop or whatever? And because it's not right and it doesn't look good and we don't feel like putting it up there unless it's world class. But if you go through all of that frustration with a guest on the day of the show, guess what? Their energy is going to be, by the time you stop, they're frustrated, they're embarrassed, they're annoyed, they don't know why it matters. So don't risk it. Do a tech check, even if you have your producer or me or someone on your team or even yourself. Do it on a previous day. It's great. You get to say a quick hi to them, makes you feel more comfortable when you talk to them on the day of. There are exceptions. If you are dealing with a super pro or a celebrity or someone with a certain level of professional status, where if you're paying them to be on your show, for example, you're not going to want to do a check earlier. You could offer it as a free service to make their production the best on the day of, but you're not going to just assume that they can actually show up for you, because guess what? They may be on a shoot or speaking or in a plane. They don't have a lot of time. So be glad that you have them. But for your average guest who is a little bit flexible, I highly recommend. Okay, so already we have to take a break. I cannot believe how fast this is going. This is so much fun though. And so I think I'm really going to split this in half. So coming up, how do you create a comfortable environment for your guests? If you think about a studio, TV studio, imagine the things they do to make their guests feel comfortable. Now we just want to apply this to podcasting, to video podcasting, to production. How can we make them feel at ease? And don't forget, I'm going to have a free bonus question for you at the end. So stay tuned. I'll be right back.
Picture this. You have worked your whole life to become an expert, a leader, a change maker, but you're so busy, most people will never discover you to recognize your work. Anne Scottlin, founder of Podcast Maestro, understands this challenge. With a decade of Hollywood experience and a proven track record as a business coach, Anne turns seasoned professionals into thought leaders through the art of podcasting. Podcast Maestro offers plug-and-play services, handling everything from pre-production to distribution, so you can focus on your message while Anne and her team manage the rest. Leverage Anne's Hollywood production knowledge, strategic business insight, and social media expertise to amplify your reach and impact. If you're ready to elevate your voice, connect with Anne Scottlin at Podcast Maestro and begin your podcast journey today.
Hi, welcome back to part 2 of today's episode. which is all about how to make the most of your guest on your podcast. What is the art of interviewing? How can you get the best from your guest? And that is what I'm talking about today. We've already talked about some of the positive and negative experience that I have had as a guest, as a host. We've talked about preparation, and now we're talking about building a comfortable environment. But first, if you are having fun today, I'm so glad that you are. I'm glad you're here hanging out with me, spending your moments listening or watching to see how you can do a better podcast and have a better production. If you would do me a huge favor, help me out, give me a like, subscribe to the channel that you're watching, make a comment. I would love to get your questions and comments and respond. And even better, copy and paste this link and share it with a friend who might also love to hang out in this space. Have fun with us, have fun with me, and maybe even learn more world-class tips on podcasting. So much appreciated. So how do you make your guests comfortable? Again, build rapport. This is where there is a difference of opinion. This is where I like to have that pre-interview tech check. Some people have a pre-interview appointment, screening appointment anyway. And I'm not against that. I think it can be, depending on the person and how well known they are and, how professional they are, you might or might not need to have a visit. But there's nothing wrong with doing a pre-taping chat, even if it's 10 minutes, but on another day. Do it that day that you're going to do your tech check with them to check their tech. And just so when you show up on the day of, you have this very casual, friendly, open vibe already. So a lot of people say to visit with the guest right before they start. I have always said no, and I'll tell you why. And this is one of my best bonus questions ever, because I've discovered, and I'm sure a lot of you out there who are already doing this professionally have, if you start chatting up your guest before you actually go live or start taping, the beginning of your episode is a bit of a dud. It actually is, because if you're like, and they're like, hey, how's it going? And you're like, oh my God, it's so hot here and everything. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, same. And we did this over the holiday and we're doing this and this. And oh, my dog did this craziest thing. And so you're really connecting. You're really having a fun time. So then you're like, okay, 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, all of a sudden it's okay, time to shoot, time to record. And it's, welcome to the show. This is my guest. And you do this whole artificial vibe. And they feel like, oh, we're starting now. So they get really serious too. Hi, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me on your show. Totally different, right? Totally different. So you want to say, hey, hi, hold that thought. We're just going to make sure everything's good to go. And then we are going to visit on the show. So you start and it's, hey, Jeff, I'm so happy to have you back. It's so good to see you again. What are you up to, my friend? And he can say, oh, I've just went on this great wilderness trip with my family and we had so much fun. We saw all these animals and my kids got totally freaked out by this giant spider and it's like it's fun and it's a laugh and it gets people engaged. It also makes your guests feel really comfortable. Now, it's not just supposed to be a big chat fest, but you can use those 30 to 60 seconds to just get your guest at ease and get your show off to a really fun, warm vibe. So that is my suggestion, is to never visit before you start shooting on the day of the shoot. Save that energy, that sort of explosive feeling for when you're actually streaming or taping. All right. So there is so much more that I would love to talk about, and we're literally already running out of time. So I'm going to wrap up, but I'm going to share a couple things with you. In part 2, we're going to move on to some really vital things, really vital issues. We're going to talk about conducting the interview and in other words, what are the pros and cons of interrupting? When is it okay and when is it never okay? That is something you're definitely going to want to hear and I would also love to hear your opinions when we talk about it. We're going to talk about, there's even stuff to do after the interview. So don't forget these critical issues. We're going to talk about some really great podcasters, give illustrations of their style to demonstrate when they've done their research and they've done their professional prep. how well they come across and how great they have been in creating that giant following. And I'd love to show a really rotten one, but that would be rude. So I can't. All right. So I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning today on the episode, I said, stay tuned because I'm going to share with you a special technique that top interviewers use to get their guests to open up, to share their best stories. What might that be? So I am going to give it to you now, even though we have more to come next time. Here it is. One of these techniques that top interviewers use is leave a moment of silence after the guest finishes speaking. This is hard to do, guys, unless, and gals, guys and gal, and all, and everyone, whoever. This is hard to do unless you practice it. Because in everyday conversation, we tend to just overlap just as they're saying, yeah, it was so, my gosh. It's toward the end of a big statement. People tend to start just using filler words. And you're like, oh my God, same as here. Blah, blah, blah. So you don't want to do that because you jumping in might prevent them taking something to a deeper level. Say you're having a deep conversation about something serious and they finish speaking. Instead of you just opening your mouth and saying, yeah, what if you kept it shut and they finish speaking and say, this was really hard on me, but I've been doing a lot better since. Pause, don't, and then they'll feel the urge to talk. And then sometimes they'll say, for example, when I went to the hospice to see my father, and now we have a story, or it could be something really fun. Oh my gosh, if it's a travel show, and they're like, yes, so I always be sure to bring my rain boots, huh? And if you don't jump right in, they might say, for example, one thing I never thought about was fording creeks when you're doing backcountry travel. Fording creeks, and what if your truck gets stuck or your Land Rover or whatever? You must have rain boots. So here's an example of when I was in Australia and we got stuck in this creek. So some of the best stories come when we do bite your tongue. I actively bite my tongue all the time, not to hurt it. I don't draw blood. No, but I stop it. They can't tell if your mouth is closed. I'm biting my tongue now. That's what I do because I have a bit of a bouncy personality. And if I just keep talking, we'll miss some of their best stories. So that is my tip for you. So excited to see you again next time or for part 2 of this, the art of interviewing, how to get the best from your guests. And this is, again, part of my series, the Podcast Power Playbook. I love this series. This is the best of the best, the secrets of the pros. If you have a podcast and want to make it better, or if you've thought of having one, if having a world-class podcast and being on that global stage is what you're looking for, then tune back in and we will give you more on how to get the best from your guests. Thanks again for liking and subscribing. I so appreciate your questions and comments, and share the link. Even if this is no longer streaming, that link will work. Cheers. We'll see you next time.